EduVerse PD Podcast, brought to you by ProEd Education Solutions, your on-the-go professional development. Welcome to the world's first education podcast hosted by AI. In this episode, our dynamic co-hosts, Andy and Liz, are diving into one of the hottest topics in language learning, building student confidence. They'll be exploring key insights from Mike Mayer's article, Building Learner Confidence with the Global Scale of English, featured in EduVerse Newsletter, Issue 18, the special edition on neo-mindsets for tomorrow's education. Whether you're a seasoned educator or just starting your teaching journey, you're sure to gain practical strategies to help your learners build confidence in using English. Let's hand it over to Andy and Liz to get the conversation started.
Welcome back to EduVerse PD. We're your AI hosts, and we're ready to jump into a topic that I think is pretty relatable for anyone learning a language.
Confidence.
Exactly. I'm Andy.
And I'm Liz.
And it's interesting because we can spend years, learning all the grammar rules and all the vocabulary, but then when it comes to actually using English in real life, it can feel like something's missing.
Absolutely. Like, all the ingredients, but you can't quite make that dish.
That's a great analogy. Today we're diving into learner confidence, and we've got a really great article here by Mike Mayer, who is Senior Director for the Global Scale of English over at Pearson.
Cool.
And he's got a ton of experience in the language learning world. He started as an English teacher.
Oh, wow.
So, he's coming at this from a really practical perspective. And, the article starts off with kind of a stark statistic. And it says that only about 25% of English as a second language speakers feel confident.
Wow.
Using all 4 language skills.
Oh.
Listening, reading, and writing in the workplace.
That's pretty low.
It's kind of a wake-up call, isn't it?
It is a pretty startling statistic. It makes you wonder what's holding so many learners back.
Well, and I think the article had a pretty interesting answer to that question. It was talking about how there's often too much focus on the what of language, like the grammar and the vocabulary,
right,
but not enough focus on the how of language, like actually using it in real-life situations.
Exactly, like knowing all the notes on a piano, but never playing a song.
Yes. And so that's where I think this GSE framework comes in, offering a different perspective, because it's not just another test to stress about.
Right.
It's really more of a framework that tries to bridge this gap between knowing the rules and actually feeling confident using them.
And what I find really fascinating is how the GSE moves away from just labeling your level like you're an A2 or a B1.
Right.
And it goes deeper into the how of actually improving.
So it's almost like a roadmap then.
Exactly. It's like a roadmap with these clear steps to guide both learners and teachers on this journey.
I like that. Okay, so I think it would be helpful to actually unpack some of those steps because the article outlines 4 key areas.
Yeah.
And they make a lot of sense to me just reading through them.
Let's start with the first one then. Accurate placement.
Okay.
Have you ever taken a placement test that just felt completely off?
Oh, yeah.
Like it didn't capture your true abilities?
All the time. Yeah, it's like being told you're a size medium when you're clearly a small. It just doesn't fit, right?
Exactly. And that's where the GSE's assessment frameworks come in. They're designed to really pinpoint your starting point in a more accurate way, focusing on skills rather than just grammar or vocabulary lists.
So instead of asking, do you know the past perfect tense? It's more like, can you tell me about a memorable experience from your childhood?
That's a great way to put it. And actually, the article gives a really interesting example comparing a high A2 and a low B1 level on the CEFR scale. That A1 to C2 system. Yeah. We all know and love it.
We've all seen it.
And it shows how the GSE can go beyond those broad labels and look at observable differences in how someone actually uses the language.
Oh, I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
What would those differences look like in a real-life scenario?
Okay, well, imagine you're at a conference, right? A high A2 speaker might be able to introduce themselves and answer basic questions, but a low B1 speaker would probably feel more comfortable initiating conversations, maybe using their intonation to kind of highlight certain points.
Oh, that's interesting.
Or even rephrasing things if they sense the other person isn't following.
That makes sense. So it's really not just about the size of your vocabulary. It's more about how you can actually navigate these real-life situations.
Exactly. And I think that kind of accurate placement is so crucial because it sets the stage for the next step, which is targeted teaching. Think of it like choosing the right weight at the gym.
Okay.
If it's too light, you're not going to see any results. Too heavy, you risk injury.
Right.
So the GSE learning objectives, they're like your spotter. They help educators find that sweet spot.
I like that.
The zone of proximal development where learning is challenging but still achievable.
Okay, I'm with you. So how do these learning objectives actually work?
Well, they're essentially like a menu of skills that are tailored to different types of learners. So you'll have objectives for adults, young learners, professional English. It really depends.
Very specific.
Yeah, and the article gives a great example of a teacher who had a group of low A2 adult learners.
Yeah.
And they used the GSE toolkit to figure out the specific objectives that were appropriate for that level and skill set.
So they're creating a learning path that's just right for those students.
Right. And speaking of customizing, that brings us to step 3, SMART objectives.
Okay, I've heard of SMART goals.
Yeah, so this is all about setting goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound.
So it's not just, I want to be fluent in English.
Right. It's got to be much more specific.
It has to be broken down.
Exactly. So instead of just saying, I want to be fluent, you might say, I want to be able to have a 5-minute conversation about my favorite hobbies by the end of the month.
Okay, much more manageable.
Exactly. And the article really highlights the importance of scaffolding, which is breaking down those skills into even tinier steps.
So it's like building a house.
Exactly. You lay the foundation brick by brick.
Each small achievement contributes to that final product.
And that sense of accomplishment leads perfectly into step 4, regular successes.
I like this.
This one's all about fostering a growth mindset.
Okay.
Which is the belief that you can improve with effort and dedication.
Right.
And the GSE uses a really clever numerical scale that goes from 10 to 90.
Okay.
Which is much more granular than the CEFR bands.
So you can actually see the progress that you're making.
Exactly. So instead of feeling stuck at like a B1 for months, you might see yourself moving from like a 43 to a 47 to a 50, all within that B1 band.
So you're still making progress, even within those broader categories.
Exactly. And the article even suggests this really simple activity where you have students rate their confidence on different skills at the beginning of a course and then again at the end.
Interesting.
And just seeing those numbers go up can be incredibly motivating and powerful.
Because it shows that your effort is actually paying off.
Exactly. And, all of those small wins, they really do add up. And they help build a sense of momentum.
Right.
And that can carry you through the inevitable challenges of language learning.
So we've got accurate placement, targeted teaching, SMART objectives, and regular successes. It sounds like a recipe for building that language learning confidence.
It does, doesn't it?
One step at a time.
And what's really neat is that Pearson, the folks behind the GSE, they've actually taken these principles and incorporated them into their own learning materials.
Okay.
So they've created what they call the Pearson English Journey.
So they're really putting this into practice.
Exactly. It's all about providing that really cohesive learning experience that's grounded in the GSE framework.
So it's not just a theory. It's actually happening in classrooms and learning materials.
Exactly. It's about understanding the why behind those 4 steps and how they can really benefit your own language learning journey.
I think that's a great point. So for all of our listeners out there, whether you're a teacher, a language learner, or just someone who's curious about this whole world of language acquisition, what's one thing from this conversation that's really sticking with you so far? What's sparking your curiosity?
Picking up on that thought about what's resonating, the article had a section specifically for language learners.
Okay.
And one piece of advice really stood out to me.
Oh, I'm curious. What was it?
It was about celebrating those small wins. How often do we get caught up in what we haven't mastered yet?
Oh, all the time?
We're focusing on those mistakes or those grammar points that still feel tricky.
Yeah, it's so easy to do that.
Right. And we forget to give ourselves credit for how far we've come.
Absolutely. I'm definitely guilty of that.
So the next time you're feeling discouraged, just take a moment to reflect. Maybe you can understand a news article now or order a coffee without breaking a sweat.
Yeah.
Or even just have a basic chat with a native speaker.
Those are huge wins.
They are. And it's so easy to overlook those everyday victories when we're so focused on some distant fluency goal.
I know.
And, celebrating those wins isn't just about feeling good.
Right.
It's about reinforcing that growth mindset that we talked about.
It all ties together.
It does. It's about recognizing that, learning is a journey, not a destination, and there's going to be both challenges and triumphs along the way.
Absolutely. And speaking of journeys, you mentioned earlier how Pearson has been using the GSE in its materials to create this cohesive learning experience. But what about those of us who maybe aren't using those specific resources.
Right.
Can we still apply these principles?
Absolutely. In fact, I think the most valuable takeaway from this article is how it kind of reframes our whole concept of confidence.
Okay.
It's not about being fearless or never making mistakes.
Right.
It's really more about believing in your ability to learn and grow.
I love that. It takes the pressure off of needing to be perfect.
Yeah, it's not about perfection.
And it really shifts the focus to embracing the process.
Right. And I think that makes confidence feel so much more attainable.
It does.
It's not about some innate talent. It's about, developing those skills and strategies that can really help you use the language effectively.
It's empowering.
It is. It means anyone can build language confidence regardless of their background or, any perceived limitations.
I like that a lot.
So it's about embracing the journey, focusing on those small wins, and believing in your ability to reach your goals.
And as we've been talking about all this, I've been thinking about the impact this has not just on learners, but on teachers as well.
Oh, that's a great point. How so?
Well, I think the GSE can really benefit teachers by shifting the focus away from simply covering the content and towards really understanding the needs of each individual learner.
It's not just about racing through the textbook to get to the end.
Exactly. It's much more nuanced than that.
It's about using the GSE as a tool to personalize that learning experience.
Okay.
So let's say you have a student who's really struggling with speaking.
Right.
Instead of just assuming they need more grammar drills,
okay,
you can use the GSE assessment frameworks to figure out what their specific areas of difficulty are.
So you can kind of pinpoint whether they're hesitant to start conversations or if they're struggling with pronunciation or maybe they have trouble organizing their thoughts.
Exactly. And then you can use the GSE learning objectives that target those areas.
Okay.
And design activities that really help the student develop those specific skills.
So you're tailoring the learning experience to their needs.
Precisely. And I think that can be so empowering for everyone involved.
I bet.
Teachers feel more confident because they know they're meeting their students' needs, and learners feel more confident because they know their challenges are being recognized and addressed.
Sounds like a win-win.
It really is. Creating that kind of positive learning environment can make all the difference.
Absolutely. So I guess at its core, that's what the GSE is all about, helping learners reach their full potential.
It is.
By giving them the tools and support they need to succeed.
That's a great way to put it.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation.
It has.
I feel like I'm seeing language learning in a whole new light.
What's really stuck with me is how the GSE encourages both learners and teachers to embrace a more holistic approach to language development.
Okay.
It's not just about, ticking boxes on a checklist.
Okay.
It's about nurturing that confidence, celebrating progress, and really fostering a genuine love of learning.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And for our listeners out there, we'd love to hear what's standing out to you, what's sparking your curiosity, what shifts in your own approach to language learning or teaching are coming to mind.
Yeah, it really makes you think differently about how we approach language learning and teaching.
It does. And for me, the biggest takeaway has been this idea that confidence isn't some fixed trait that you either have or you don't.
Right.
It's actually a skill that you can develop.
That's a good point. We often talk about building fluency, but I don't think we always think about building confidence in the same way.
Exactly. And the GSE really gives us this framework for doing just that through those 4 steps that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Accurate placement, targeted, teaching smart objectives, and, celebrating those regular successes. It's all about empowering learners to see themselves as capable language users. And I think that shift in mindset can be so powerful because it's not just about, reaching some external benchmark or passing a test.
Right.
It's about feeling comfortable and confident using the language in real-world situations.
Exactly. And that's where I think the GSE's focus on those practical skills really shines.
Yeah.
It's not about, memorizing grammar rules in isolation.
Right.
It's about being able to communicate effectively, connecting with others, sharing your ideas and experiences with the world.
That's what makes language learning so meaningful in the first place.
It is. It's about opening those doors to new possibilities, to new relationships, new ways of seeing the world.
Absolutely.
When you have the confidence to step through those doors, that's when the real magic happens.
I love that. And that kind of brings us full circle back to that advice from author's name.
Yeah.
That we mentioned earlier about, embracing the journey and celebrating those small wins and never stopping believing in your ability to learn and grow.
So wise words.
They really are. So as we wrap up this deep dive today, is there anything else you want to share with our listeners?
Let me think.
Any parting thoughts or questions to kind of leave them pondering?
Well, I think the biggest question we can all ask ourselves is this. What does language confidence mean to you?
Oh, that's a good one.
How would your life be different if you felt more confident using English? What doors would you open? What conversations would you have? I really encourage everyone listening to take some time to reflect on those questions. Because when you have a clear vision of what you want to achieve and when you believe in your ability to get there, that's when the real learning begins.
That's a great point. Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of EduVerse PD. And for our listeners out there, thank you for being a part of this learning journey with us. Until next time. Keep learning, keep growing.
What a fascinating discussion on building learner confidence. Thank you, Andy and Liz, for sharing those insightful strategies. And a special thanks to Mike Mayer for his thought-provoking article. If you'd like to read the full piece, Building Learner Confidence with the Global Scale of English, you can find it in EduVerse Newsletter, Issue 18. It's available on our website at www.proed.com.vn/eduverse and filled with innovative ideas and practical approaches for tomorrow's educators. Remember, the EduVerse Newsletter is your platform too. If you have ideas, insights, or strategies to share, we'd love to feature your work. Submit your article today. Thanks for listening, and we can't wait to welcome you back in our next episode of the EduVerse PD podcast, brought to you by ProEd Education Solutions.